Alright, so a theme that has been going on in my life a lot recently is forgiveness. And what I'm learning is that forgiveness is simultaneously, I don't know. I Googled it before I made this video, but whatever. Forgiveness is simultaneously, I think that's right, a death and rebirth. And it's specifically speaking the death that I didn't know I needed to the rebirth to a life that I always wanted. So it's been pretty wild. And just to really just dive straight into it is the thing that I'm learning most about forgiveness, and I think why forgiveness is starting to come up is because I'm realizing that you can't forgive, you don't know what to forgive essentially if you have all of this stuff repressed. So first you have to get it repressed. That's not right. First it has to come up to the surface. And then once you feel it, then once it's not repressed anymore, then you can start to embrace that, and then you eventually come to this point where you face, I gotta let this go. I have to forgive. So why am I talking about this week is because last week I talked about my experience thus far with psychedelics and how psychedelics have been not only helping heal physically Lyme disease, and I have the blood work to prove it, more on that in that video, is also everything that psychedelics has been bringing up within me emotionally. And so over the course of the 6 months, a lot has come up, and so I think that's why this is starting to become a theme in my life, that I'm embracing forgiveness. So I wanted to talk about it. So yeah, psychedelics, healing journey, all of that has brought up a lot of stuff. And whereas it's very awesome that I'm feeling all of this stuff because it's stuff that I have repressed and buried and I haven't felt it before, it's beneficial for a time because you have to feel it. You have to embrace it. You have to feel those scary parts, hurt parts of yourself in order to heal these parts of yourself. So I've been feeling it, but it's only beneficial for so long. Once you feel it, you feel powerful. And you feel like you're taking your power back, and you're like, I haven't ever experienced this before, and I have the freedom to do so now. But there comes a point where it kind of backfires on you a little bit. And it backfires because you eventually, like physiologically speaking, if you hold on to repressed emotions, hate, bitterness, rage, betrayal, whatever it may be, you will become in a chronically stressed out state. You will probably experience symptoms of PTSD. No, PTSD is not for just like veterans and stuff like that. Most people, I'm convinced of this ever since studying trauma, suffer from some sort of PTSD. Obviously that's a controversial topic that I can talk about on a later time, but that's my opinion. But you know, part of that, you can't sleep. It's hard to sleep, lack of sleep, lack of energy. It affects you physiologically to be holding on to these not only repressed emotions, because your body, even if you're not consciously feeling them, your body does. But even when you are feeling them, if you hold on to these emotions that are brought up and these feelings that are brought up, it can physiologically harm you. So how do you let it go? Well, all right, so follow me in this. Follow me in this. I promise you it'll be worth your time. But how do you let it go? First off, what I've already said, you gotta feel it. That's what I'm learning. That's what I'm doing. You have to embrace it. You have to feel it. And once you start feeling these things, it's gonna start uncovering all these different rabbit holes that you didn't even know were there because you've never allowed yourself to feel these things and to go down these rabbit holes. But now you have, now you're feeling it, and you have felt it, you embraced it, but now you gotta let it go. And that letting go looks like forgiveness. But here's the thing, how the fuck do you forgive somebody that has betrayed you, consciously doing so? How do you forgive somebody who has hurt you in unimaginable ways? Like, how do you forgive somebody that you know in your bones that they deserve some sort of justice? You want justice for that situation. And it's actually that justice, that thing that you're holding on to, that is actually killing you. And why you're not, it's a part of the letting go. But anyway, how do you get to a point where this justice is essentially served. And this is obviously where forgiveness comes in. And everybody will say, just forgive them or forgive yourself or whatever. And we've all heard the thing, forgiveness is more for you than it is for them. Definitely, totally. But forgiveness is something way easier said than done. So how do we come to like a practical approach of forgiveness and how to let things go? And this is what I'm learning. This is what I'm figuring out. So like I said, I'm going to tell you. So let me back up because this has been like a whole theme this week. But I came to a place last week where I got super triggered. And just to keep a very long story short, part of the reason why I've really started going hard at this healing journey type thing is because in January I had an unfortunate phone call with a clinical psychologist who informed me that I had been in a cycle of narcissistic abuse. I didn't know what narcissism was. I didn't even know what emotional abuse was, and that I'd been going through it for actually years and years and years. But this specific situation was pretty bad. So I'd been going through narcissistic abuse, and the other week I've struggled a lot with like PTSD. When it comes to that and other things regarding that. But last week I was triggered super hard. And well, I should say this. For those of you who know about narcissism, you know what narcissistic abuse, you know what that whole thing means. For those of you who don't, I'll probably talk about it more in a later video once I feel ready to address all of that kind of stuff. I don't really feel ready at this moment. But I will say from all of the things that I've learned, narcissism, going along with the theme of this channel, narcissism runs rampant in the church. But again, different topic for a different time. But the other week, last week, actually it was this week. It was this week. Good Lord. I got super triggered. And then that's when all this stuff started coming to me. So how do you forgive somebody like a narcissist? How do you forgive a sociopath? How do you forgive a psychopath? Somebody who is just that level. How do you forgive that? So what popped into my head when I was kind of talking to myself in a way, talking to my higher self, if you will, call it spirit, soul, whatever, call it whatever you want. I was like, how do I forgive this? And what came to mind was forgiveness is death. And basically I needed to die. And I had a couple of dreams about this before this happened, and it kind of wrapped everything together. I won't go too in depth into the dreams. They were pretty intense dreams. And they have a lot of really cool metaphorical analogies to them. I love dreams. Anyway, but yeah, forgiveness, what I felt like was coming to me was forgiveness is death, and basically I needed to die. And obviously since I grew up Christian and I know the Bible very well, my brain still uses the Bible as a example for a number of things. And I don't look at the Bible anymore as a religious text. I do look at it as a religious text. I don't look at it as my religion or my spiritual path. I look at it kind of like how Jordan Peterson looks at it. I'm a huge Jordan Peterson fan. He looks at it in psychological terms and sees these stories as sort of archetypical stories of the human nature and the hero's journey, if you will, that every human essentially goes through. But I look at Jesus as Christ as the highest potential of self. So what came to mind when thinking this was obviously forgiveness is death. And then I started thinking about Christ and how he forgave and what he had to go through in order to forgive. And when I started thinking about this, the thing that kind of rocked me was that Jesus, if you think about this, if you read the story and you think about this and you kind of read in between the lines, Jesus, yes, he stood up for himself. But in the course of going to the cross and that whole journey, he let himself be triggered. He let himself be betrayed. He let these evil things happen to him in order to take him to the cross to die. And I started looking at this as this could be the same as allowing these emotions that you are feeling that are coming up that you've repressed for a while, this hate, this bitterness, this rage, whatever, allowing that to take you to this death that will ultimately become a rebirth. Because that's the thing that you got to keep in mind. Jesus died, he came back to life, but he had to die first. And I think this is very a archetypical story of the human experience and human nature and what we all have to go through, aka we all come across forgiveness. So this part, I have my notes here that I'm looking at. This part's kind of, want to know what you think about. Tell me what you think about this part. This was in my train of thought when all of this started coming to me, but I really would love to know what you think about this part. So, there is a Bible verse in Romans 5 that talks about basically anyone would die for a righteous man, but Christ died for us while we were sinners. So here's my thoughts on that. You would transform and become somebody new, die and rebirth for someone who you loved, but would you do the same for a person who betrayed you? And most people would say, obviously, no. But the thing is, this is what is holding you back. Now, this doesn't mean that if you forgive somebody that you got to let them back into your life. Obviously, it doesn't mean that. But that rebirth, the sacrificing yourself, the rebirthing that would happen for a loved one, you change. You absolutely change. And you rebirth. But would you let that hurt and pain and the ways, like the repressed emotions that come up and all of that, would you allow that to change you as well without this, like, the motivating factor in having and transforming for somebody that you love is like, well, this is for them. I love them. But would you do that for yourself? Would you, like, I am hurting. I am in pain. I am holding on to this. Would you sacrifice and die for yourself, for your own rebirth? I'm willing to bet a number of you, myself included, have done that for others. But would you do it for yourself? Would you allow the hate and bitterness to flow through you, aka feel it, unsuppress it, will then allow... Dude, my notes are so jacked. Freaking A. Basically what I'm trying to say is, would you allow all those feelings to take you to a place of rebirth? And obviously the question is now, how do we take ourselves to that rebirth point? Well, here's another interesting thing that I came across. Here's what was... This shook me. This kind of connected all the dots for me. And it was thinking about what Jesus said. I'm pretty sure he was on the cross. It wasn't his last words, because his last words were, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" Which is also an interesting point when thinking about forgiveness and the death and rebirth thing. Very interesting. But anyway, one of the things that he said, either on his way to the cross or he was on the cross, was forgive them, for they know not what they do. So I feel like my notes said it best, so I'm literally just going to read from my notes, which is, hurt people, and the people who hurt you are in an immense amount of pain. They don't know better. Yes, they have intentionally hurt you and manipulated you, but do they know why they've hurt you and manipulated you? It might even be calculated. This is how narcissists, sociopaths, psychopaths work. They literally calculate the pain that they are going to inflict on you. And it gets into all sorts of trauma bonding and other stuff. It's messy. But do they know why they are doing that? Do they know why that is their actions of behavior? Now, full disclosure, something like a psychopath, they can't help it because physiologically the part in their brain that feels empathy is smaller than the rest of humans, so they literally can't help it unless they educate themselves so much and decide to change. It's a whole thing. Psychopaths are a different story, but for sociopaths and narcissists, it's kind of, they are made instead of born, if that makes sense. So why do they do that? Do they know what's underneath the behavior? No. And they are scared to face their demons. So they learn to cope, and that coping is manipulating others to get their needs and using people as though they are a commodity. They're trying so hard to be loved, but they can't love themselves because they are unwilling to let themselves hurt. So the very thing that you're doing, which is uncovering these repressed emotions, they're not willing to do because they're so scared of it, but you're not. And that's a very brave and courageous thing to do, so congratulations. You're incredible. You're amazing. So basically through all of that is what I'm starting to say now, because I realize the people who hurt me, they literally don't really know what they were doing. So instead of like what Jesus Christ said on the cross, aka your truest self, what he said was, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. What I am starting to say to myself every time I get triggered was, Nate, forgive them. They don't know what they were doing. Even just saying that right now, I feel like a weight has been lifted off of me. Like, if they truly did know what they were doing, they probably wouldn't have done it, but they are in so much pain that they felt like that was the only option. And having this mindset doesn't make you better than them. It doesn't make you better than them. It actually develops empathy for that person. And just like it's developing empathy for that person, you're also developing empathy for yourself. Because a lot of people will hold on to the shame of they let that happen to them, which they didn't know any better. Like, that's why people don't even talk about pain and hurt, because of shame. That it's like, I let this happen. I see it now and I feel so stupid for letting this happen. Why did this happen to me? So in saying, Nate, like me and this journey of forgiveness and stuff, saying, Nate, forgive them for they didn't know what they do, is Nate, forgive yourself because you didn't know. Now you know, and now you can prevent it from happening in the future, but you didn't know. So Nate, forgive yourself because you just didn't know what was going on. You didn't know. So you have to have compassion for having this frame of thinking, having this frame of mind that connects all the dots. For me, at least, is teaching me to have empathy for them and also develop empathy and love for myself. And when you do this, at least when I've been doing it, I feel like I'm taking the power back. I feel incredible. I feel like I am healing. And so basically, I let the triggers happen now. These triggers, every time I get triggered, it is an invitation into this simultaneous death. Dude, it's going to annoy me. Is it simultaneous or simultaneous? Somebody fucking tell me, please. Anyway, it is this death and rebirth that happens at the same time. Every time I get triggered, it is an invitation into that place. And so I let myself, in keeping in with the story, be taken to the cross so I can experience this death I didn't know I needed into this rebirth of a life that I'm like, this is a life I've always wanted. And so I let these triggers happen. I allow myself to feel these things, to let this hate, bitterness, this betrayal, this want for justice, I let it come up. And then I get to this point where I feel it, I allow it to take place, and then once I realize this isn't serving me anymore, and you can really tell that you're like, I am now just really holding on to this. Then I start to say that to myself. Forgive them, Nate, for they didn't know what they were doing. Forgive yourself, Nate, because you didn't know any better. It still takes a bit of work, but for me, this kind of little story and journey have really helped me to let some of this stuff go that I've been holding on to for so long that I realize I'm like, holding on to this is not serving me. It only served me for a time so that I could allow it to come up and feel it and get it out. But now it's not serving me and I have to let it go. And I have to look at it as the past of I didn't know any better. And this is one of the reasons why educating yourself on things like narcissism or like domestic abuse or emotional manipulation, gaslighting, stonewalling, all of it. Educating yourself on these things is so incredibly helpful because then you develop these new eyes and you learn to see things that you didn't see before. And you have to give yourself some amount of grace that they didn't know better and you didn't know better, and now you can move on because you do know better. It doesn't make you better than them. You have to allow that empathy to come in. And if you think that makes you better than them, then that's a whole other problem that's a whole other hurt and wound that probably still needs to come up, and you probably still need some healing. I know I have that too, just being frank and honest. And I had this in my notes, so I just got to say it. That empathy, that death rebirth, that's going to allow you to transform. You will transform this death rebirth through forgiveness, for letting it go, letting it be in the past. And this can be an action as well, like saying it, doing it, allowing it. When I say allowing yourself to feel things, for me, when I allow myself to feel things, I yell, I scream, I run, I sprint. Running and sprinting really help me. You can't just say, oh, I'm feeling it. You have to Your body wants action. Your nervous system is show, not tell. I know I haven't talked a lot about like physiology when it comes to trauma, but your nervous system is show, not tell. You have to actively like journal, run, scream, get a punching bag, something to allow yourself to feel these things. And then literally saying, like, Nate or whoever you are, forgive them. I forgive them because they didn't know what they were doing. Forgive them because they didn't know what they were. Nate, I forgive you because you didn't know what you were doing. But you have to get this stuff out, and it's through action. So maybe I should make another video and talk about that, but I just felt like I needed to put that in there. And then once you have that action, once you allow that action to take place, you've felt it, you've embraced it, and you come to a point of realizing this doesn't serve you anymore, that's when that rebirth happens. That's when, you know, you can say those things and all of that. So, yeah. Let me know what you think down in the comments. What is forgiveness to you? What do you think about all of this kind of stuff? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like, subscribe, share, and as always, I'll see you misfits in the next one. Peace out. Dude, I'm still, oh my God, peace. I used to wish for life after all of this, but now I cherish every moment in life I get. So